Welcome to His Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, as he makes his way into the room. Thank you, Your Excellency. You're very welcome. Thank you all. Please be seated. Your Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, the Regional Director of the World Bank, Mr. Franz Dries Gross, Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission of the AU, Tefera Mekonnen, Head of Office, DFID Rwanda, Ms. Sarah Metcalf, all the heads of the civil aviation authorities that are gathered here, representatives of the International Civil Aviation Organization, country delegations, senior government officials, regulators, innovators, investors, students who are gathered here today, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the first ever African Drone Forum. A very warm welcome to all of you who have traveled to Kigali to be here with us today. My name is Louise Kanyonga and it is my honor to be your co-master of ceremonies this morning together with...
My name is George Mulamula.
Thank you. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, this African Drone Forum comes at a very opportune time as African governments across the continent are deliberating how to leverage technological innovations to leapfrog growth into the fourth industrial revolution. We all know that digital technologies and innovations will shape future global economies. However, these are evolving at a very rapid pace, and this time Africa cannot afford to play catch-up. The great news is that Africa has resoundingly shown that we're able to embrace a true spirit of innovation and that we've harnessed digital technologies to become a very innovative and dynamic player in the global economy. And there is perhaps no greater symbol of this than the mobile phone revolution. So Your Excellency, today in this same vein and over the next 3 days, and even in the panel discussion that we just had, we're going to be having some very important conversations on how we can harness drone technologies to positively disrupt infrastructure in Africa. But we will not just be talking over these next 3 days. This forum features some very exciting practical activities that will center these conversations. And George has the honor of talking about some of these very cool things that will be happening.
Right. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I think the ADF is broken up into two major components. One is the Symposium, which we're here, and the other one was the practicals, which started yesterday with the Lake Kivu Challenge. There we saw the drones fly. We saw how security and safety is taken into account before a drone flies, and then how it moves, and we discussed the issues of UTMS, how you can unify the management of drone with aerospace for our civil aviation air traffic controllers. So to kickstart it off, can we please have the video that gives a summary of what transpired and gives the background to the ADF? Thank you very much. Your Excellency, in addition to the Lake Kivu Challenge and the Symposium, we have got the Business Challenge, where people are competing with good ideas that can help solve social issues in the country. And then we have a few startups that are also coming up with innovative ideas, but they're just starting. And then we have the expo, which is around the building here at KCC, which we hope you'll have time to go visit. Without further ado, may I please invite the Honorable Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Honorable Clever Katete, to say a few words. Welcome, please, Honorable Minister.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, Honorable Ministers present, World Bank Regional Director in charge of Transport and ICT for Global Practice, Civil Aviation Authority representatives, industry leaders of unmanned aircraft emerging technologies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Your Excellency, we are honored by your presence at this Africa Drone Forum taking place for the first time on the African continent. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome all the delegates who have come from various countries to attend this important event. This three-day event brings together over 800 delegates from a wide section of the aviation industry, including policymakers, civil aviation authorities, and the business community. Participants include 392 delegates from the international and regional aviation bodies in over 30 countries, and 200 students pursuing science subjects selected from our universities, high schools, and vocational training schools. Your Excellency, the forum provides an environment for technology demonstrations and discussions of how to create an enabling regulatory and policy ecosystem to unleash the social and economic benefits of drone technology while maintaining public safety. The program has a series of topics which include the fourth industrial revolution in Africa, unlocking lower skies, future of food deliveries in Africa, and drones for agriculture, just mentioned but a few. We also have the drone flying competitions, the Lake Kivu Challenge, which will be hosted in Karongi and is designed to test and improve ways in which drones can solve social challenges. Your Excellency, drone technology has significantly improved the lives of Rwandans in various ways. We have registered positive results with no reported safety and security issues over the three-year period. Forums such as this one should help scale up solutions so that the entire continent can benefit. It is important to note that there is still a lot of work to streamline and harmonize drone industry regulations. These systems are based on cutting-edge developments in aerospace technologies and artificial intelligence, and offer new and improved civil and commercial applications, as well as safety and efficiency in the aviation industry. We believe that new technologies of drones, robotics, and digital fabrication hold huge prospects for economic development and match the needs of emerging African market opportunities. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today the African Drone Forum kicks off with potential to evolve into a regular forum, which showcases advances in automated systems that can make a significant difference for the people of our continent, particularly those living in remote communities. As I conclude, allow me, Your Excellency, to thank the World Bank, the FID, the Korean government, and other development partners for supporting this conference. I also wish to extend similar appreciation to the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, for the continuous efforts to coordinate activities towards safe integration of unmanned aircraft systems. On this note, allow me to thank you once again and wish you a happy stay in Rwanda. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your remarks that critically highlighted what we need to do to fully optimize the social and economic benefits of the drone industry. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to invite the Regional Director of the World Bank, Mr. Franz Dries Gross, to also deliver his remarks and also invite our guest of honor. Please join me in welcoming him as he makes his way. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame of the Republic of Rwanda, Honorable Claver Gatete, Minister of Infrastructure, Honorable Paula Ingabire, Minister of Information Technologies and Innovation, representatives from the African Union, the World Economic Forum, the World Food Programme, ICAO, the East African Civil Aviation and Security Oversight Agency, UNICEF, representatives from African Civil Aviation Authorities, many school children, welcome to this, and all of you valued speakers and participants from Africa and around the world. It is a huge honor for me to be present here today for this first-of-a-kind forum in Africa. And I'd like to commend our hosts, the Republic of Rwanda, for their leadership and vision for bringing us together around such an exciting and forward-looking agenda. I also want to thank the organizing agencies, development partners, academia and industry that have pulled together to make this happen. I know we have representatives here from about 44 countries, from both public and private sectors. And it's great to see such a mix of aviation regulators as well as industry innovators, and a fantastic also to see 200 young science engineering ambassadors. So why is the World Bank here supporting this first African Drone Forum? For starters, Africa is on the rise, with growing economies and young populations. Profound demographic shifts will shape the next decade. Cities in Africa are growing very fast, and by 2035, about half of Africans will live in urban areas. For many countries, the labor force is also doubling, with millions of young people seeking jobs. A key challenge in this demographic transition is to ensure that growth is really broadly shared and that rural areas where the majority of Africa's poor still live aren't left behind. Forecasts we have in the World Bank suggest that without significant shifts in policy, extreme poverty will still be in the double digits in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030, even as it dips to the low single digits elsewhere in the world. 82% of people living in extreme poverty in Africa still live in rural areas. So what we all seek together, is a future that brings opportunities to the young and to those rural areas. I'd like to commend the African Union, which took a decision in 2018 to urge member states to harness emerging technologies, and especially drone technologies, for humanitarian and agricultural development. We also need to think of the effects of climate change over the next decade. We already see its impacts in Africa. Just over the past couple of months, widespread flooding in East Africa due to unusually heavy rains. Last year, the effects of Cyclone Idai in southern Africa. Climate change is exacerbating these trends and affecting the poor the hardest. Thankfully, mobility is a major opportunity for unlocking Africa's rural opportunities. Right now, only 34% of Africans, rural Africans, live within 2 kilometers of a paved road or an all-weather road, compared to 90% in East Asia. The consequence is that those hard-to-reach African communities face higher costs for goods, long waiting times for deliveries, and therefore lower productivities in rural facilities and fewer opportunities for rural citizens. Fortunately, new technologies are transforming transportation as we speak. Improvements in electrification, autonomy, and new business models for ride-sharing are driving disruption in transport markets and opening new opportunities for the future. Electric motors and propulsion systems are today cheaper to run and operate than petrol engines. For cars, they're 10 times cheaper to run than diesel and petrol, and they have 3 to 5 times the expected lifespans. Over the coming decade, autonomous technologies also mean that vehicles will become even cheaper to operate and safer. Still, electric cars are more expensive to buy today, but the cost of batteries for electricity storage has been dropping at 16% per year over the past decade, and the trend is actually accelerating. Today, lithium-ion technologies are storing energy at about $150 per kilowatt hour. In 2014, just 6 years ago, there were only 3 large factories in the world for lithium-ion batteries. Today, there are 96 mega factories producing such batteries around the world, and that's what's driving costs down. Models predict that electric vehicles will be cheaper to buy than petrol cars as early as next year. Now, when we switch to aircraft, it's not just the cost per kilowatt hour of energy stored, but the weight of the batteries. And here, improvements are happening also. Energy density in batteries is improving at about 5 to 8% per year. So lower-cost unmanned aircraft are much cheaper to operate and simpler to maintain, and they open up possibilities to set delivery routes for smaller airfields, hard-to-reach communities, and to operate in more hazardous areas and conditions than are suitable for manned systems. The use of drones for humanitarian aid is already happening in Malawi and Sierra Leone, which countries have established humanitarian drone testing corridors, and the World Food Programme is trialing systems in Africa. These systems could also benefit from lower capital requirements. Drone ports are expected to cost about as much as a petrol station compared to much more expensive airports. The opportunity for all of us is to rethink the infrastructure needs for these new kinds of supply trains, bringing greater reach and resilience. Now, how do we unlock the lower skies to accelerate these new opportunities? From our view in the World Bank, the real opportunity is e-commerce and the digital economy in Africa. The rapid adoption of mobile phones and mobile finance across the continent is both an inspiration and a foundation for growth. A majority of African adults already have a cell phone. In some countries, the adoption rates are 80 to 90%. The GSMA estimates that by 2025, there will be 1 billion SIM cards in Africa and over 620 million unique subscriptions across the continent. The digital network is already contributing 3.5 million jobs in Africa, and the digital economy is already about 8% of Africa's overall economy. In the World Bank, we expect that by 2023, about 9% of Africa's economy will be digital. So this massive network of connected people and businesses is where the real opportunity is. Data services are connecting farmers and entrepreneurs to new markets and services, and mobile finance is enabling more efficient and inclusive access to capital. So just bear with me and imagine how the lives of those rural farmers we began at the beginning to talk about, how those lives for rural farmers can change if they can use their cell phone to order drone services. Drones that digitize their farms and use the data to register land titles, to improve their farming practices, to send crop samples via drones for testing, or receive pesticides via drone delivery, or spare parts for their water pumps. Or fishermen who can access mobile money more easily, don't need to travel to town to cash out, because agents can use drones to move funds across isolated areas where they're most needed. Imagine how village life could change if the local mechanic became a digital blacksmith who can order parts on demand without spending the time and costs of traveling to the city. Drones can accelerate Africa's digital economy. Survey and mapping drones can drive digitization of rural agriculture and land assets and help governments manage rural infrastructure. Cargo and supply drones can serve businesses and communities that are digitally online but physically isolated, with lower cost, faster, and safer on-demand services. From medicine to spare parts, seeds to insecticides, documents, and cash on demand, drones can boost the digital economy opportunities that are already emerging all around us. The global drone industry is here in Africa now because Africa is where the exciting work is. In Rwanda, as we heard just now in the introductory video, autonomous flights already outnumber manned flights and provide us with significant opportunities to learn about airspace management and rethink how we unlock the lower skies as a resource for development. It's also in Africa where the technologies necessary for beyond visual line of sight autonomous flights are being tested and proven. In Zanzibar, the World Bank supported the government to carry out the world's largest drone survey of over 2,500 flights. This helped to accelerate rural land demarcation and modernize town plans and building registration. It also delivered more detailed data for a tenth of the cost of traditional surveys. It also created a legacy of some of the most experienced drone pilots in the world, many of which are now working all across Africa. The project also seeded the Tanzania Flying Labs, one of Africa's first business incubators for drone companies. And I'm happy to see that the Flying Labs are here today and still going strong. So how should Africa prepare for this exciting future? We need to ensure equitable opportunities for the next generation in these new economies. It's therefore essential to invest in human capital, the skills, and access for a new generation. I'm very excited to see here in 2020 the launch of the African Drone and Data Academy in Malawi that aims to develop skills in drone operations and drone applications and services. The World Bank is also pleased to collaborate with the UK in supporting the first African drone business competition, bringing 10 finalists here to Rwanda to present their visions. Let me also at this juncture just very briefly acknowledge the very generous support that's been made available by the Kingdom of Denmark, the EU, the Republic of Korea, and GFDRR, without whom this week's events would not have been possible. Success, and I'd like to close with these thoughts, isn't only about bringing in new technologies. It's crucial to have the right policies, institutions, and enabling environment. The countries in Africa that will reap the best rewards from these new opportunities will need governments that are prepared, forward-looking, and bold. I think it's essential and telling that we have such strong representation here today from regulatory bodies. We have 25 African country regulators, as well as regional and global organizations with us this week. And it's so crucial to have global drone innovators mixing with local entrepreneurs, with youth, and others. Let's ensure that the lessons from the African continent are shared amongst ourselves and with the world this week. Let's hear what Africa's priorities and future opportunities are. And let's work together between regulators and industries to make the skies safe and inclusive for growth. Let's make sure that we use this first African Drone Forum to build a common vision and understanding of the future we all want. Let me thank again the government of Rwanda and His Excellency President Paul Kagame for starting us off on this very exciting journey. Thank you very much. I now have the honor to welcome His Excellency Paul Kagame to share his opening remarks.
Please be seated. A good morning to you all. Honorable Ministers, Mr. Franz Dries-Gross, World Bank Regional Director, Mr. Tefera Makonnen, Secretary General of the African Civil Aviation Commission, and heads of civil aviation agencies, representatives of regional and international organizations, and members of the diplomatic corps. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to join you for the first ever African Drone Forum. A warm welcome to Rwanda, to all those who have come from near and far. We are greatly honored to be your hosts, and I wish to thank the World Bank and other supporters for partnering with us to organize this inaugural forum. I understand that some of you visited Karongi yesterday for the start of the Lake Kivu Challenge flying competition, which will continue there later this week. This tournament has a great practical value because competitors get to demonstrate what is possible on the ground. Rwanda is committed to fostering innovation and entrepreneurship as a key pillar for transforming our country and our continent, both socially and economically. We are already seeing some of the benefits, not to mention the even bigger potential that lies ahead. The use of drones to deliver life-saving blood products and vaccines to remote health centers is already a reality in our country here in Rwanda through our partnership with Zipline. A Rwandan company, Cheris US, is using drone technology for crop monitoring and mapping to support the productivity of our farmers. Another application already in use is the inspection of power transmission lines from the air to help make our electricity grid more reliable. There's also a pilot project to test the effectiveness of drones for mosquito spraying. There is so much that can be done with this technology. The African Drone Forum, therefore, comes at the right time. Let me offer a few thoughts on the importance of this work for our continent. First, the policies and regulation that we put in place should promote innovation and not slow it down. Our experience in this sector has been that the priorities of safety, security, and innovation cannot be effectively catered for within the regulatory framework. Second, continued investment in a physical infrastructure and human capital should go hand in hand with the adoption of drone technology. Why limit ourselves to just using drones? We can also design and manufacture drones in Africa, as demonstrated by examples at this forum. This allows the technology to be tailored to our specific needs and to help create new industries that generate employment and prosperity. Finally, cross-border cooperation is essential. The flying competitions taking place in Karongi illustrate how much there is to gain by fostering regional cooperation in this sector. I trust that the 5th East African Community Aviation Symposium taking place later this month will bring us closer to regional harmonization in terms of policy and regulation. The African Drone Forum is about turning challenges into opportunities. This can-do mindset should inspire and guide us more broadly in all that we are trying to achieve for our continent and the world as a whole. Let's challenge ourselves to ensure that the outcomes of this gathering are practical and meaningful for the people of our continent. I wish you fruitful deliberations and also wish the best of luck to all the teams competing in the flying competition. Thank you all for visiting Rwanda, and thank you for your very kind attention.
Your Excellency, murakoze cyane. Asante sana. Your speech motivates us, Your Excellency, to do more, to use the drones for social good. The importance that you have mentioned of drones, particularly to promote innovation with enabling regulations and safety, the importance to tailor the industry to the needs of our continent, and your support for cross-border and harmonized regional regulations gives us food for thought on what we should be doing in the next phases. And these are things that the ADF is going to be deliberating on for the next 2 days, and hopefully we'll come up with something that shows the path forward and what we need to do next. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your kind remarks.
With that, we have come to the close of this opening ceremony, but we will now have an official photo, and protocol will guide you, Your Excellency, as well as all of those who are part of the photo. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me once again in showing our warm appreciation to His Excellency as he takes his leave. Thank you. If I could please ask everyone else to please remain in the room. We will be taking a short few minutes break in the room. And immediately transition to the next part of our program, and George will brief us on this. Thank you.
All right. Knew about drone technologies and repairing computers and IT, so he opened up a shop to do that. So as he was doing that, he was charging, and he made lots of money. The people around him saw that he was making money, so someone came and opened up to his left, and then his business went down. And then somebody else went and opened up to his right. His business went down even further. So he was surrounded by these two people who were taking away his business. So he removed the sign of the name of the company and put up another sign that said entrance. If you didn't get it, please see me later. So, Mr. Kamau, where might you be, please? Pauline, wait. Yeah, but I told you. Okay. Following Mr. Kamal's, the program for the day, due to the changes, what will happen is this. We shall listen to Mr. Kamal talk about the fourth industrial revolution in Africa today, and then we'll have a tea break. And because we have democracy, do you want a 15-minute tea break or a 20-minute tea break? $20 or $15? I'm told that if I say 15, it will be 20. So should we say, so what do we agree upon? What do you agree upon? 15? 30? I mean, if you're saying 30, why don't you say 29 and 60 seconds then? So we'll have a tea break. Okay, let's compromise in between and we say, when you do the average, you come up with 25. Will that work then? All right, so we'll have 25 minutes tea break after that, and then we come up for the Africa updates after that, and then we'll have lunch and then training. The training listed here was that there was a sheet that was handed out, and for those who are interested in to know the basics of how to fly a drone, this is what the training is all about. I'm hoping it's still going to be there. So we'll confirm that later. And then, depending on when we finish the Africa updates, then we will see how long lunch will be. It's supposed to be 1 hour, but we'll see, try and catch up. Mr. Kamau, you're welcome. Are you mic? Oh, you have the mic there, right? All right. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about the fourth industrial revolution and the impact it's having or bound to have on the African continent. What I'm going to be sharing today has more to do with, in essence, an overview of the fourth industrial revolution, but clearly drone technology is a subset of that, and therefore it's obviously very relevant. And also just to say that the fact of the matter is that fourth industrial revolution covers a great many types of technologies, but it's easy to sum it up as those technologies is sort of a merger or a bringing together of computing and digital technologies, physical technologies, biological technologies on the back of electronics and coding. Now the backdrop for this conversation here on the fourth industrial revolution in Africa is that we still have really grinding poverty on the continent, and you can see from this picture a lot of people still suffer inadequate housing, inadequate healthcare, inadequate roads and infrastructure, and so there's a huge challenge. And the fact of the matter as well is that the state of the African economies in terms of industrialization sits somewhere between the first, second and third technological revolutions, industrial revolutions, and a little bit of impact from the fourth industrial revolution is being felt, but only starting to be felt. And this means that because the population on the continent is already at 1.2 billion and set to double by 2050, the challenges that we're faced in terms of trying to build our economies are huge, and there's a chance that the fourth industrial revolution might actually widen the gap between African countries and the industrialized countries. But at the same time, it may be an opportunity to actually accelerate the kind of development that we need to see on the continent. And I think the examples that we heard earlier today about how drone technology specifically is already having an impact on the continent is a very good indicator of what can happen and what should happen as long as people who are innovative are able to be as innovative as they can be in order to be able to see this through. A lot of the workforce on the continent is in the informal sector. This is a picture from Kenya. In Kenya, we have about 85% of the workforce in the informal sector. It's higher than most African countries. And you're finding that these people are engaged in work activities that have very low productivity, not very high income as a result, very low competitiveness with imports. And so we really need to be able to impact how we make things on the continent. This is only one example. The informal sector is a lot wider than just people who are making things. But it's a good example because it tells us that in terms of industrialization, we really have no choice but to be able to make more of what we consume and to do so competitively. I happen to sit on a council at the World Economic Forum called the Global Council on the Future of Production, and we were part of the preparation of a document called the Country Readiness for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And so we looked at a number of countries across the world and indicated or assessed them to see how ready they were for the future. And this is what's very important here is that even very wealthy and industrialized countries really have a difficult time trying to imagine how the world will look in a year or two or in a decade because of how fast technologies are changing as part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So much more the case for African countries. About 25 African countries were included in the survey, and 22 of them are found to have very low readiness for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So this is something that policymakers, large business, and so on needs to really be able to understand and take account of. An overview of the analysis looked at two things. On the left of that graph, you can see the structure of production. And that's looking at the current status of the various countries that were surveyed. And that's broken up into the complexity, which is captured in the Economic Complexity Index. And this is an index that gives a very good idea about the variety of things that can be made in a given economy. So you look around you, there's simple things like the chairs that you're sitting on, the bottle of water that's ahead of you, the clothes that you're wearing, and so on. On the continent, despite the fact that many of these do not require rocket science, but the economic barriers to be able to make these things competitively on the continent are real and are really serious. And so this is a very good indicator about how ready a nation is, what its complexity index is. The second is the scale. And scale, again, is really important. It's been spoken of several times today that African countries are fragmented. There was that question about drones traveling from one nation to the next and how regulation needs to be aligned so that this sort of thing can happen. And especially where you're looking at investment. Investors want to be able to invest in scalable ideas, and if they can't understand exactly how those ideas will scale on the continent, then the likelihood is that the kind of investment that you need to be able to get the ideas that young people and older people on the continent have will not really be forthcoming. On the right, you have the drivers of production. And if you break that down, you're looking at technology and innovation, human capital, global trade and investment. We're looking at institutional frameworks, sustainable resources, and the demand environment. Now, what I'm going to be speaking about shortly is the work that I do in a center that I run in Nairobi that has an impact on this readiness that I'm describing here. But strictly speaking, what I do really falls between technology and innovation and human capital. So we can innovate and we can prototype and make all manner of things that really look very good. But if the other four, the global trade and investment, the environment, the ecosystem is not dealt with, then you find that the kind of impact that you'd like to be able to see will not be possible. In the country readiness, this is a graph that indicates those countries that are leading in terms of their readiness, those that have high potential, those that have legacy issues to deal with. They've got heavy investment, say, in industries that are about to be overtaken or have been overtaken by modern, more up-to-date, more productive systems and can't just flip and change. And then there's those countries that are nascent. And as I indicated earlier, most African countries fall in the lower left quadrant, the nascent countries. Now, one of the ways in which many African countries have responded to the demand to be able to modernize and to be able to keep up with technology is the creation of hubs. Most of these hubs have been developed outside of government involvement, except for in countries like this where the government's really very proactive. And it's been found that the impact of these hubs is quite significant. In this particular survey that was produced last year by GSMA, you're seeing around 314 tech hubs across the continent. And most of them are focused around software especially. And we all know that the impact of software and digital technologies is very high. And there is a sense, even in terms of in the literature, that the world is right now in a post-industrial era, that perhaps policymakers in countries like in Africa and other parts of the world should not really be focusing on trying to build their manufacturing capacity, because the chances that they'll be competitive and able to compete with, especially the factory of the world, as is often spoken of, China, are low. But I believe that there are important examples that show that this is not the case. And the application of research and effort towards developing local industries and technologies needs to be done judiciously, so that you focus on those that can make a difference and then continue to purchase those technologies that are more effectively obtained from outside as you do this. So we in Nairobi, I run a center called Gearbox, and Gearbox is a center that looks at hardware rather than software. And so we're in the industrial area in Nairobi looking at how we can actually make things. And this graph, before I get into that, is showing why it's so important. You're looking at the total intra-country trade in the East Africa region as just an example from the continent. And you're looking at this trade declining by about 20% between 2012 and 2016. And over the same period of time, underneath the graph, you see the note there that says that imports from China accounted for 22% of total imports to the region. And so a further analysis of whether this is correlated would be important, but I think there is certainly some impact on the fact that a lot is being imported from China in particular, but other countries as well. And it means that, for example, in Kenya, manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has dropped from 11% to about 8% over the last few years. And we need to really be looking to see how to tackle this kind of challenge. At Gearbox, we look at three fundamental ways of doing this. Our core functions are around giving access to people who are innovative around hardware to machines. And these machines are consistent with the fourth industrial revolution. So you're looking at digital design and fabrication, robotics. You're looking even at simple things like the example I gave earlier, how do you make a chair and make it competitive so that it can be sold in the local market instead of being imported, say, from Malaysia. And so a wide variety of things. And the people who have ideas and want to come and make the things will do so in our space using a membership model that's very akin to a gym membership. So you pay a certain amount, $100 per month for everyday access, $40 for a couple of days a week. At the same time, we also train in areas, again, that are future-facing, areas such as the Internet of Things, embedded systems, artificial intelligence, digital design and fabrication, robotics, and so on, and so that people coming in are able to understand better how to use the machines that we avail and the systems and the methods to be able to produce what it is that they want. And we also have a very strong focus on human-centered design. I've taught at the University of Nairobi in engineering for many years, and I know that engineers are very often guilty of designing or working on things that are a challenge to them, interesting to them, but quite often the market couldn't care less. And so by the time they've solved it, they find that the new problem is that they can't sell what it is they've made. So we have a huge onus on human-centered design. So you're looking to design something. You don't graduate from our courses until you make what you've proven has, through your research, has a market. We also contract, and contracting is really important. This is where you have people who aren't really interested in making things themselves, but what they'd like to do is, because they've understood the market, they've been out there, they know exactly what is needed, say a water filter or something that specifically has a huge market, and they come in and say, can you make it? And they give us the specifications. And so the engineers in this instance are either our staff members or people on a list that we have who will then go on to develop the idea. And then we look at research, where we're looking at trying to be very deliberate about the areas that we're trying to develop, working with the universities, and trying to see how we can make the universities more directly related to what the market needs. I've worked at the University of Nairobi as a lecturer for about 14 years, and that was the inspiration for starting Gearbox, because there was a huge disparity between what we did and what the market required. Now, in recognition of the fact that much of what much of what is required for the fourth industrial revolution has to do with electronics. We decided to invest heavily in the ability to design and make printed circuit boards. So we go from the copper all the way to what you're looking at there, and to devices such as this. This is Omondi, who designed 50 prototypes of a pay-as-you-go system for water irrigation, so that farmers can use solar power for their water irrigation, which is much cheaper than what they're currently using, which is either petrol or diesel, or in some cases electricity. And to be able to do this and go out into the market and test it on the 50 farmers and come back and make all your changes and go back into the farmers and test it again is really important in the pathway to investment, because now an investor can see how it was used and who was able to pay for it, how much, and so on and so forth. And so this was done, typically would take about 6 months working with a company in China. The company in China would not be, most really good companies in China would not be interested in 50 parts, so you get companies that are probably not very good, don't speak English, huge problems. We had a lot of experience with this. Your 50 devices come and 10 don't work and that sort of thing. So having this capacity in country is really very important. We also make 3D printers, and in this case, this is one of my students who has a company called Africa Born 3D Printing, and he's making microscopes, and in this instance, he's actually making 20 for a local network of vets in the country. And the design came from an open source group at Cambridge University who make and design various instruments and allow anybody to be able to download and make it. So this is also indicative of what's happening in the new world around technologies, the open source movement as well. We use the same 3D printers to make parts for medical equipment in small clinics, in rural settings, in poor urban settings, where you get an instrument that may have been donated, for example, is fairly sophisticated. There aren't people who understand how to make it. The parts are not available locally. And so we found that it's actually possible for somebody who's been taught how to use the 3D printer to make a business out of this, going in and designing with a micrometer and actually reverse engineering and making whatever parts required using the 3D printer. We have Roy Alela, who his niece was born deaf and mute, and he paired up with the lady next to him who's an electronics engineer, and he's an AI expert, and they were able to make these gloves. So the deaf person puts on the gloves, and they trained through machine learning the system to be able to understand what every gesture means in terms of sign language. And then what you do is you'll download his app, select male or female voice, and your phone will speak all the words that you're signing. It's been found to work. We partner with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers in an annual competition they hold for the continent at Gearbox, and he was one of the winners and has managed to travel to the US with this. And the government of Kenya has now put about $40,000 behind him. So the National Innovation System is responding to what's happening on the ground in the centers that I described, which is a very positive thing. Here we have the result of a master's project, which was to design a combination or embedded solar cells in roof tiles. And after the young man, Tony Nyaga, got his master's degree, he and his sister, who's an architect, started a company. And what they do is they pitch their roof tiles to people who are doing development, say, of 50 houses at the cost of just a roof tile without the solar. And then they make their money slowly in a pay-as-you-go model over time. And the person using the electricity that's generated from solar is paying a third of what they pay the utility company. So it makes lots of sense to them as well. And we were really proud to be able to share this with this gentleman, Mark Zuckerberg. I won't tell you what he said about it, but his pal, this guy, was able to do, did the same thing in the US, the very same design. We've tried to research, and our research so far tells us that they did it after we did. But the problem was that it was patented only in Kenya. So the opportunity to sue Elon Musk has gone. But, but anyway, as I say, the research is not conclusive. Now this is a video showing a typical production area in the city of Nairobi. It's an informal setting. A lot of people work like this, and they're making products such as those that you see there. Very low productivity, low quality, but they're in the market, and so they're still in business. And this is actually giving work to a lot of people. We have been able to design machines that should be able to replace a lot of the people in that picture. And that's the challenge, because this machine is a plasma cutter, CNC, which means it's computer numerical controlled. This is driven by the computer. The engineer who designed it is used to be the head of engineering at Gearbox. He now sells these machines, and he's now doing 6-axis machines for local customers who are really excited because the person selling the machine also post-sale maintenance is available. But what we're trying to do now is take these into the settings that are in informal sectors, and the challenge is that the first thing that happens is hundreds of people lose their jobs when you put a machine into that setting. So we're looking at how to retrain and so on, so that the obvious increase in productivity, which will mean more money for whoever has bought the machine, will mean that they'll be able to hire people who are currently doing what I showed you in the video to do things that they'll be able to, that are different, that should be able to give them a livelihood. That's a CNC router that can do carving of wood, also made at Gearbox. And this is a pipe bender, which is automatic. And here we've been partnering with the Kenya Commercial Bank Foundation. And the idea here is to make greenhouses. They've been able to establish a market for hydroponically grown food anywhere in the country, in the city, that should be a lot cheaper than buying it from the current sources. There's exciting companies like Twiga Foods in Kenya, some of you might have heard of, that are completely transforming the supply chain and making it cheaper for people to buy the vegetables. And we believe this project will have such an impact. But the beauty of it is that the market has already been found, and so a bank has come in and will loan the people in the informal sector to buy machines or to access them in centers that we're building, and because they're ascertained that the sale will be there, or at least it's been de-risked to the level that they can actually extend loans to the informal sector. So one of the characteristics of an informal sector is that it's broadly not eligible for loans, and therefore growth is a problem. And so we believe that doing things in this manner could mean new ways of pulling the informal sector into the formal sector. And the idea is to be able to also give access to these machines all over the country. So we're setting up mini gearboxes everywhere. We're doing the first one actually starting this week to do so. And we see this model as applicable across the continent. And here is what it might, partially might look like. You have containers that can move around, that have the equipment. And you're going from the familiar, so you have welding equipment and so on in the bottom of the container. But then on the top, you'll be teaching, and it's a classroom, the container at the top, and you can teach 3D printing. The informal sector doesn't do plastics forming, mostly in a country like Kenya, and introduce vacuum forming and all kinds of very interesting processes that actually can compete with the formal sector. And we've been looking in a granular way at how it is that supply chains can be aggregated to try and make sure that the competitiveness is available. The younger generation is critical. Here's a young 15-year-old who's just been taught how to disassemble and reassemble a 3D printer, and we're getting lots of them coming in through schools and so on. So that's the model that we have, and we believe that this lends itself to what you heard being spoken about earlier, the need for the drone application to be supported by people who can make parts for drones and maintain drones and so on. And so that's why I believe I was invited to give this particular keynote, because this is a model that can work to support what you're all doing here. Kudos to you all, and those who are in the challenge, good luck. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kamau, thank you very, very much for that keynote address. I must highlight one thing that is very, very important. We talked about Drone Operations Center. I want you to think of a petrol station. A petrol station's core activity is to sell petrol or fuel, or essence for my colleagues. So if they have the petrol station, that's the core activity. We're going to have a Q&A in a moment. If that's the core activity, then you have a room where you have refrigeration. You sell soda, you sell biscuits, and you sell very many other things. Think of a drone operation center as that. Take what Kamau has done, put it in a drones operation center. You service other things, fabrication lab, you have fabrication of small parts, spare parts that can help the motorbike rider. He's got a nut that needs to be fixed. Instead of going into town, he's very far on an island, you have a 3D printer that creates that. So, and this is what we mean about the drone operations and fabrication labs and the drone operation center. But to have all that, you must allow for regulations and have innovation in order to have that done. So as we go to a Q&A, any Anybody wants to challenge Dr. Kamau here and ask him a very difficult question? He's my friend, you know. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure about that.
After this. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I am Mwamuzi Bernard, a teacher of at Gashora Girls Academy. I'm a teacher of physics and mathematics, but crossing into IT because of the need that I've seen. But mine is just a challenge, not only to Dr. Kamau, but to everyone. All of you are talking about innovation, but when do we start to innovate? Do we have the right education to make our students question in order to bring future innovators? Everyone has been talking about university, but then they never think about the lower education. At the moment, we still have a lot of content. The students come out cramming that content. Sometimes you don't even want to cram it, but what do you have to do? That's what you need to do in order to pass. So as you're thinking about university and those who come out to have the skills, we should trigger the young generation to have that kind of aspect. Not to think that those who go to skills are the ones that have failed school, and the very bright ones should be the ones who go for a degree and all those other certificates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There is a lull. My stomach is churning, you know. I missed breakfast this morning. So, any last question before we break, not for tea, but for lunch? Going once?
There's one here.
Going twice? Ah, okay, you caught me. Right. Yes, sir.
Hello, Yusuf Abdul Karim Imoga from AMS. So for your roof solution, the solar roof solution that you said allegedly that Elon Musk took away from you, what capacity in terms of output for that on a 20-foot kind of a container? Like when you have that, do you know the value? Like when you have that on a roof like that, what kind of power is it going to come out?
It's typically on the order that is for a typical sort of middle-class family, the way that he's designed it, so that you have your appliances such as your television, your lights.
No, I mean the value of in power, in volts or watts. What's the output when, let's say, you put it on a roof?
It's like on the order of 3, maybe 5 kilowatts for the kind of thing that he's designing.
Okay, 5 kilowatts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So with that, Dr. Kamau, thank you very much for your keynote address. We thank you for coming. Please, a hand for Dr. Kamau. If you're like me, I hope you didn't miss your breakfast. Lunch is now being served. We will be back in 1 hour. So should we say 1 hour? So at 1:15, we come back to start the Africa updates that are coming up next. Lunch is served in the foyer. If you have a green leotard or a red leotard,